It was really a matter of weeks ago, folks, when the state universities was proposing a 2% increase in tuition, that there were a lot of voices being raised with concern, with some good reason. The cost of that tuition increase, about $110. The Campaign for College Opportunity a few years ago estimated that if you took an extra year to graduate from the state university, that it would cost that student and their family about $26,000. $26,000. And unfortunately, it's not even an issue for many CSU students of even graduating in a fifth year, that tens of thousands every year never graduate at all. The good news is that through our great leadership of our state university, our chancellor, our university presidents, our faculty, our student leaders, that there has been a great deal of attention and focus now on this issue of graduation rate, student success. Currently, 19% of our students at State University graduate in 4 years, 19%. And about 57% graduate in 6 years. And that was the basis for the work over the last year and a half by the governor, by the legislature, by you all, to look at ways in which we could do something about that 4-year graduation rate. That when we tell students college is 4 years, to have it be something that really they could actually attain. And working together, we passed what was referred to as the California Promise with Senate Bill 412. It coordinated the work of the community colleges and the state universities to focus on this issue of a 4-year degree. And it was a program, an optional program that was enacted, nothing required. It gave a pathway to students who wanted to get through in 4 years, that they could get priority registration, they could get enhanced advising, and they could try to achieve that 4-year degree, not have that extra year, that extra cost, and actually have a degree that we all know can be hugely impactful for that student, their family, and for our state. Now, one of the things the bill last year did do, in addition, was to require a report from the state universities on other financial incentives that could be considered that might help improve that 4-year graduation rate more. And the CSU submitted a report to the legislature earlier this spring on potential incentives. And what they said is that, quote, effective incentives could encourage more students to keep pace with their commitments and could serve as a means to attract more students to commit to these programs at the outset of their academic careers. And so the bill before you attempts to build upon that feedback and that advice that we received from the state universities. Specifically, this bill does the following things. It sets up a student success and online completion fund. It allows money appropriated to this fund by the legislature to be used for these incentive programs. Some are term grants, on-track progress grants, or a tuition freeze to qualifying California Promise students. And the bill, those are optional elements, and the bill has one requirement, and it's a requirement that CSU commented upon and indicated they supported, which is providing back-end tuition waivers for a student who is unable to get a class through no fault of their own in order to graduate in 4 years. So these incentives are all contingent upon an appropriation by the legislature. This bill sets up the structure. It would still need to be funded. The CSU would be allowed to choose between any of these incentives to implement them or not. It had to be authorized by the trustees. It had to be a decision by every university president in consultation with their faculty and their campus community to choose some of these incentives as a way to get kids through in a more effective, efficient way. So that's where this bill came from. It's out of a belief that we're making great progress in getting the university to focus on this important priority and getting kids through. Let me finish with an anecdote. I chaired the Senate Committee on Student Success. We had a hearing a few weeks ago where we brought in campus leaders from around the state to talk about the incentive programs that they have implemented or are planning to implement this year and next. And the president of Sacramento State told me in a phone call what we then heard at the hearing, which was that they took a number of these incentive programs and they tried them out this year at Sacramento State. Historically, of the freshman class at Sac State, 11% complete 30 units, which is to be on track to graduate in 4 years, okay? 11% after the first year have stayed on track and done the 30 units. With these incentives that Sac State put into effect this year, 41% completed their 30 units, 41%. Now this is at a campus that has a 4-year grad rate of 8%. That's Sacramento State. They're not happy about that. They're trying to do everything they can to turn it around. This bill before you is to attempt to give them more tools in the toolbox, provide more encouragement by the campus to provide those classes so it has that back-end tuition waiver, which the university is supportive of. And I think it's going to continue the momentum that we are building together to focus not just on access, not just on quality, not just on affordability, but student success, getting that degree, which we know can mean so much. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Moved by Ms. Baker, second by Mr. Levine. Any witnesses in support?
Jared Russo, Cal State Student Association. We don't have an official position, but we've been working with the author's office to provide feedback and want to thank them for working with students.
Thank you.
Any witnesses in opposition? Please come forward.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecilia Ruesta, and I'm a student at Fresno State. When I was admitted to Fresno State, my daughter was 9 months old. I wanted, like most people, to get through college as fast as I could so I could start working and bring that financial security for my daughter and me. Because I was receiving financial aid, I qualified to use the campus daycare. But to my surprise, the wait list was long, and my daughter wasn't accepted until a year and 8 months later. For the first 2 years, I had to limit myself to taking 9 units per semester and work part-time while parenting my child. I had to leave my baby in friends' houses with family members and the cheapest sitters I could find. I only made it by using food stamps, living with my mom, and together paying the rent, and slowly making payments on the car that takes me 25 miles every day to campus. Today, I'm a proud grad student in the counseling program at Fresno State. My daughter is 6 years old, and we still must wait 2 more years before I'm able to bring the financial security she deserves. I think that if a bill like SB346 had existed when I was starting school, it would have hurt me, not helped. I believe that this bill advantages those that are privileged enough not to only worry about being a student and target those who have other responsibilities like working, taking care of siblings and elderly family members, and parenting like myself. Taking 12 to 15 units per semester was not even a choice for me. To maintain a good GPA and be accepted in the master's program I'm in right now, I was only able to take the 9 units that I could able to put my time to and be able to work part-time and parent my child correctly. This bill feels like a punishment to those who cannot take the 15-unit required. Not only do we not get the financial support that we need, I believe that we get to watch them go farther and quicker than us. For that reason, I oppose this bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Kevin Weir, Professor of Sociology at CSU Sacramento, and here today on behalf of the 28,000 instructional faculty, coaches, counselors, and librarians represented by the California Faculty Association. CFA opposed SB 803, which Senator Glazer introduced earlier this session and was held in suspense on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and we oppose SB 346, which contains the exact same language as 803. While we agree with Senator Glazer that work must be done to improve the CSU's graduation rates, which are lower overall than national average, we have concerns about the unintended consequences that this bill would grant increased advantages to those students who are already on track to graduate in 4 years at the expense of other students and their needs. SB 346 targets students that have the capacity to take 30 units of course credit per academic year, which is full-time. While those students stringing together classes in addition to juggling jobs and/or family responsibilities may not be able to take advantage of the financial incentives offered in this legislation. The tuition freeze component of this bill is particularly problematic. as it is not needs-based and could thus result in subsidizing tuition costs for particular students, regardless of their financial need. We find this troublesome as it puts the burden of tuition increases on the backs of those part-time students who, in my experience, are working too many shifts to enroll full-time. The bill would appear to raise the cost precisely for those who are least able to afford it. They're already struggling to pay for tuition, housing, transportation, and food costs. The fact of the matter is that we're talking about a student demographic that is so housing and food insecure that the recently enacted state budget includes funding to address the issue of hunger on our campuses. CFA believes that the financial incentives provided for in SB 346 will exacerbate inequalities of the current system. If we want students to graduate on time, we need to ensure that more funding is provided system-wide as we still face critical funding shortfalls. Without significant funding increase, we cannot take the necessary steps to ensure that more bottleneck courses are offered and more tenure-track faculty are being hired to teach those additional course sections that students need to graduate on time. We need additional professors and academic advisors to support student success, not financial incentives for students who may then overload dangerously on coursework. Without additional funding, we cannot expand enrollment growth and ensure the opportunity to study at the CSU is available to all qualified students. In closing, the incentives provided for in SB 346 will not help the CSU students that I work with every day towards their academic success and will not contribute to on-time degree completion for those students. Even worse, I fear that SB 346 will exacerbate current inequalities and/or encourage course overload and have a degrading effect on the quality of education. For all of these reasons, we oppose SB 346. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Kimberly Rosenberger with Service Employees International Union. We appreciate the author's efforts and laud the goal. We think that we should be trying to compete with the national graduation time, but it ignores one thing, which is that the CSU serves a very unique body. California has a different higher education system than the rest of the country, and we think that these goals go against that very student body. CSU is recognized national leader in educating a broad, high-need, historically underserved student population. Those are the students we are trying to help. Those, I think, spoke here today. I don't need to go on any more on that, but we're concerned about the disparate impact of this bill. We think that the goals are correct, but the means of doing so are not the way that it should be done, and that funds shouldn't be directed in that manner. We urge your no vote, and we hope that we can address this issue down the road, but not in this manner. Thank you.
Questions, comments from the committee? Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank all the witnesses for the thoughtful testimony and the Senator for the dedication you've shown to the four-year graduation rate and helping with student success with this. I am struck by some statistics you mentioned. 57% of CSU students finish in 6 years, and only 19% in 4 years. And the effect that that has on not just that student delayed in beginning life and beginning success after completing the degree, but there's others waiting to be at CSU. And we need to make sure that we are opening those paths of opportunities. And I think this is one way to get there. I was a co-author of your legislation last year, co-author of the original bill as introduced this year, and I'd be pleased to be added as a co-author to this as well. I'm going to ask if you would address some of the opposition testimony. I think it's thoughtful and worth considering, but I just weigh in that from what I understand in this isn't just the financial incentives. You are also in this bill offering the possibility that if someone who's in the California Promise program and they're unable to complete because the course is not available to them, that they won't see a tuition increase because of that. Because if we, the state or CSU, is the reason a student is unable to finish on time, we should be doing something about it. And I really appreciate that you're putting more tools in the toolbox to raise everyone. And I think that is critical. That preamble in mind, be grateful if you can just address the testimony and have an opportunity to be heard on that. With the chairs.
Yep. If Senator and Assemblymember Levine, I forgot to ask for other witnesses in opposition, so I'm going to call witnesses in opposition if you'd give your name and the group that you represent. Then we'll go back to Ms. Baker's question.
Susan Green from California State University, Chico, speaking as an individual in opposition to the bill.
Josie Malik from San Joaquin Delta College, speaking as an individual in opposition of this bill.
Hi, Kim Jerome, Professor of Political Science at Cal State East Bay, strongly oppose this bill.
Eddie Kirby, on behalf of the California Young Democrats. I issued you guys a letter a little late yesterday, but we just have concerns. We haven't yet taken a formal opposed position, although our board is going to move that forward at our next meeting in August. The inequities that this would create, we're very concerned about, and we detailed in the letter that we gave both to the author and to all of you members. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Glazer.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, before being elected to the Senate, I served for 4 years on the Board of Trustees of the state universities. Huge supporter of the power of our wonderful universities to change people's lives. And a part of the narrative at the time that was always talked about was our non-traditional students, that we have students that do need to work, that have to take care of their families. And it really wasn't until I was elected to the Senate that I dug down a little deeper into that question. Who was going through our system, and were they motivated to get through, were they not? And here was a startling fact about that. 85% of our enrolled students at the CSU are full-time students. They're taking 12 or more units, okay? Now, not to say that we don't have students that do have these issues. We do, and we have to be very sensitive to them. But most of the students want to get through in 4 years. It's costing them time and money, and they want to get to degree. So it's not that it's a narrative that fits the majority. It's a narrative that fits a part. The California Promise Bill was written in a way that focused its attention. In fact, it guarantees participation at a minimum to any low-income, underrepresented, or first-generation college student. That's in law today. And in fact, the registration priority that are given to California Promise students, it's based on a campus committee made up of faculty and students, and it has as its goal the same focus, the kids who need the help the most. The tools in the toolbox in this bill are the exact tools that can help someone who is working, providing some financial grants to help them and maybe not have to work as much, to give them a summer school course at no cost, because maybe they can't take the full load during that year. Maybe they can only take 12 units. So the whole way this thing has been shaped has been to try to give the campuses the tools to uniquely, individually, through consultation, advising, connection, figure out what is it going to take to help that student succeed and help them do well. The financial the guarantee for if you aren't able to take a course at the end through no fault of your own, it's modeled after a San Bernardino program that's been in place for 6 or 7 years. In fact, I think the question with the conversation with the chair earlier today was, do all the campuses have to do the same thing, or is it, each one gets to choose? And the fact is, campuses have been choosing today how they interact with their student body, how they can make them successful, and that has been going on. And at San Bernardino, they've had the back-end guarantee, and they're supportive of it. In fact, the CSU looked at that when they examined that question, and they were supportive of doing it statewide, giving all the campuses that requirement. So it's a toolbox. The only thing out of this bill that is more forceful is the requirement to the campuses be responsive to the students. If they can't get a class through no fault of their own, don't charge them for that. Make them all successful, and that's an incentive not just for the student side, but for the institution side. So I appreciate the opportunity to answer those questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Levine.
Yeah, thank you for this bill, Senator Glazer. It's a great bill. The status quo is a spectacular failure. It doesn't serve any student well. It's not even a snapshot in time of today. Just in my own time, I can go back 25 years to where speaking with my friends, understanding that they could not get the classes they needed at a CSU. They were abandoning their college education at one campus just to be able to complete college somewhere else. And I even, would credit being in the seat that I'm in today because of my relentless pursuit of priority registration while at Cal State Northridge. And I found that avenue through student government. And, when I was going into my senior year, just to get, I was a summer school student every summer at a junior college to get the units that I needed. And I think that the numbers that we have are extraordinarily challenged given the high number of students that need remedial education as well. When I was a senior, going into my senior year, I took summer school classes at Northridge, but I could not afford it. And so I took the courses, and then I went to my professor and said, I never paid for this. Can I enroll in the fall when a full load is 12 units and pay for the extra units then? And can you give me credit for the class then? Because, and so the fall semester of my senior year, I was enrolled in 19 units because that was the way to make it affordable. And not every student can advocate for themselves and can figure out a way and build a relationship with the professors to be able to do that. I was fortunate that I had a professor who understood what that challenge for me was. And so what we have is a system that serves no one well. This is not going to serve anyone less, but this is going to hopefully, one, expedite students through the system much more quickly, which will in fact provide greater resources for the students that remain. And that, I think, in this debate has been forgotten. And so I thank you for shepherding this conversation through, and with this bill as a partner to your other bill, hopefully really innovating the system in a way that it has needed for a generation in an extraordinarily important way. And let's remember, which you said in your opening presentation, that these are campus decisions. So this is a discussion that's going to take place at each campus about how appropriate they are. We will not be making these decisions in Sacramento. We're, in fact, empowering them with the flexibility to make decisions that are appropriate at the campus level. Thank you.
We've already had a motion by Ms. Baker and a second by Mr. Levine.
I have a question. You mentioned in your opening remarks that you did worked with Sacramento State, and they actually applied some of these incentives and had a good return. What were those incentives that they actually applied?
They provided summer session at discount or no cost for extra classes. They provided some priority registration, and I believe he provided some grants, some individual, I don't know if you called it dean's grants, to help those kids who were just on the edge and needed a little more incentive to take that class to get what they did. And this is the freshman group that just started last fall, finished up their first year this spring and summer. So that was the 11% historical staying on track of 30 units, and they moved it over to 41% in this first freshman class at Sacramento.
And how were the students made aware that there were, in essence, a student success program available to them, or that they could become involved in it, or so forth?
Yeah, great. All credit to President Nelson. He created what he called a Finish in 4 program, and he marketed it throughout the university and had communications with every freshman student so they could see that there was this pathway. No student had to be on it. It was an option for them. They had 2,300 freshmen enroll in the program. So you can tell they were talking to a lot of kids to have 2,300 of their freshman class sign up to get through. Of those who signed up on the program itself, 64% of them completed their 30 units in the first year. So that's an extraordinary, that number is almost mind-boggling to understand. These things happen usually in very small increments. They moved the average unit load to a freshman to 14.5 at Sacramento State this year. 14.5 average for all the freshmen at Sacramento State, at a university that had one of the lowest four-year graduation rates in the state, 8%. And President Nelson is on fire, got his whole faculty and leadership team motivated and the kids motivated to really turn this thing around. And he's doing great work. Now, what he didn't have was the back-end guarantee, which this bill would allow, would institute. So there are other things, other toolbox things that would come out of this bill, but certainly nothing replaces wonderful leadership, and we certainly have it at Sacramento State.
I guess one of my additional comments would be, and these are impressive because I know that one of our serving on the hire committee higher ed committee, not only this time, but in the past, some of the same conversations come up 3 years later, and that, of course, is not only about access, but once we get them to, whether it's community college or four-year or UC, is the percentage of graduation rate in total. But I also think it's how we're counting it. As you said, there's different bodies. There's returning adults coming to school with children. There's the 18-year-old right out of high school. So we're counting all these as one kind of aggregate. But I think the program that reminds me of this, and I do want us to look at more information later because it's similar, is the transfer program where they're guaranteed entrance from the community college into the four-year Cal State. But again, that backs them all the way up to being an entering freshman, which really means they need to know about this either their spring semester of high school or their spring or their summer session or before enrolling in order to do that four-year pathway. So again, I'm interested in this. I'm not sure it's exactly what I'm going to support today, but I think it's very important that we look back at some of the things we're already doing because students have to have this information as they go into the community college to take advantage of that four-year transfer program. And in your case, like you said, because that particular administrator met or marketed or promoted, there was some success. So a lot of these programs have to have that component added to them because it's a great secret if they don't have that information. But I appreciate this, I think, jumpstart.
May I respond?
Sure.
Assembly member, thank you so much. And the community colleges, they're the workhorse of the entire state higher education system. And we all have to be molded together in every which way, communications as well as the academics. And the California Promise program has a community college element to it. And these toolboxes incorporate those transfer students who can move into a state university as a junior with priority registration. So there's you're absolutely right. We have to communicate better, and there's certainly pathways we want to only make better. And I think this bill only encourages that and gives them the same tools as a incoming freshman.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Dr. Weber?
Yes, I appreciate your efforts, and I know your genuine concern for wrestling with this issue of graduation and folks on track and so forth and so on. Could you reiterate for me, and I was running at the time we talked, exactly what is required or what is optional, what is required in this bill? Because there are a number of things that are here that appear to be somewhat onerous for campuses to implement in terms of finances and so forth and so on. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what is required and what is optional. And I think that becomes important.
Great. The only requirement in this bill is the back-end tuition waiver. That's the only thing this bill requires, that every campus, not one campus, every campus that has a California Promise program has to incorporate the back-end tuition waiver for any class that a student can't take through no fault of their own. That element came out of a report to the legislature this spring by the CSU. In that report to the legislature, they said this. This is the CSU, based on our prior experience with existing campus-based programs, this is an effective approach to financially incentivize the program. Additionally, this approach also acts as a campus incentive to ensure that students have the classes they need in order to graduate within the time frame of the program. So this came out of that report to the legislature. That's the only requirement. The other thing that the bill does set up is a fund to provide incentives. Without any funding into the fund, it doesn't really mean anything. The elements, the financial incentives in the bill are only options. It's a toolbox. They have to be adopted by the trustees. They have to be decided by the campus president and the university stakeholders that they want to incorporate them. They don't need to incorporate any of them.
And the funds are put into a fund by the state.
By the state budget.
Not campus fees.
That's correct. So next year, as we engage in the budget process, we'll have that conversation about how we need to fund the CSU and all of our higher education systems better. And as a part of that, do we want to put money specifically in this toolbox for these incentives to help kids get through faster? And that'll be the discussion for next year.
And the summer school grants and those kinds of things are optional?
That's correct.
Okay. And so this basically is a list of things that are optional for campuses to undertake if they choose to participate in this program.
That's correct.
California Promise. And the Promise program is an option as well.
That is correct.
How many campuses are involved in it right now?
Well, we put minimums in the legislation last year. The CSU is exceeding all of them. I believe the freshman program is being offered at 10 campuses this coming August, and the transfer program is being offered at 19 campuses this coming August, well above what the minimums that were required by the bill. Look, at the system has really stepped up. Just a year ago, the four-year graduation goals for 2025 in CSU set by the system were 25%. They wanted to move from 19 to 25%. They've completely revised those goals in the last 12 months, and now the goal they set is 40% by 2025, with no achievement gap between kids, zero, where there is about a 7 or 8% gap today. So they have really embraced this, and I think that the goal setting going up so quickly, I think, is an indication of their enthusiasm. They know we can do better, and together we can do better.
Now, you said that the number of credits for students has risen to approximately 14 units.
At Sacramento State, for those in the freshman program, their average unit load was 14.5. Happy to give you that document from the university.
14.5 for after the first year.
For those in freshmen in the first year.
In freshmen in the first year.
The typical unit
that
load.
included summer school. So at the end of this year and summer school, it was 14.5.
I can't tell by looking at their document that it's in a summary session that talks about their discount summer session tuition. So it talks about that in the narrative above, but I don't have that as an actual documentation on that 14.5 unit load.
Okay, it would be interesting to know. Did they indicate in the 14.5 credit union whether or not that included remedial courses or just the regular university courses?
I don't know the answer.
Because that may have impact upon, I think we can look at the data and it looks very exciting after the first year because it includes the summer school. If it includes summer school, then it reduces the number of units per regular semester if you have to do summer school. But in addition to that, it may, if it includes a number of remedial courses, it would also mean that the students are still not on track, need to be on track, because a lot of the units are remedial courses versus the standard courses that are there. The fact that it doesn't really require, now this was held in a PROPS before the other bill that was similar to this bill. Do you know the price tag on this bill? Was there a price tag placed on it?
Yeah, there was some, I think, more misunderstanding in the course of this. There was never meant to have a price tag on the bill this year. It was really a fund being established to be funded through the budget. I think that may have contributed to the confusion on the hold in a PROPS, but leadership agreed that the bill should be moved forward and supported the amendment of this bill here in your House. So I think they were comfortable that the process should continue, and I know it will go to your appropriate committee here, but it's meant not to have a financial impact this year, and the financial impact next year will be determined by the legislature, whether they want to fund it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Senator, just to clarify, so the only thing that the bill mandates outright is that tuition for those students who through no fault of their own weren't able to take the units to graduate in 4 years.
That's correct.
Now, the other, as you refer to them as tools in the toolbox, they would first have to be approved by the trustees of the CSU?
Yes, sir.
And then those campuses who would want to could use them?
Based on the order of the resolution by the trustees, as they saw fit.
Right. Okay. We had a motion. We had a motion by Ms. Baker, second by Mr. Levine. Senator, if you'd like to close.
Members, thank you for the consideration today. We work so hard to get our students prepared to go to college. They work hard to get the grades, to get the test scores, to get admitted, to get the loans, to get the grants, and then they're in. And we celebrate that in so many ways. And the biggest tragedy of all is for tens of thousands, they finish that whole process, now they're in debt, and they have no degree. And it's something that we're all focused on doing better on. We need to do better for these kids. We need to do better for California because we know how important that degree is to California's success. With that, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to say that while I very much appreciate the intent of the bill, I hear what the student who came before us had to say. And I think that there are unforeseen consequences of moving in that direction. And for that reason, I will not be supporting the bill at this time. Madam Secretary?
The motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Medina?
No?
Medina, no. Baker? Baker, aye. Arambula? Arambula not voting. Bloom? Chavez? Chavez, aye. Choi?
Aye.
Choi, aye. Irwin? Kylie? Levine? Levine, aye. Lowe? Quirk Silva? Quirk Silva not voting. Santiago? Weber?
Not voting.
Weber not voting.
4-1, the bill is on call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.